Imagine a continent of 1,000 kingdoms, a mosaic of cultures, languages, ancient traditions. This was Africa. It was a place of vast empires like Mali and Songhai, intricate city-states along the Swahili coast, diverse societies governed by their own complex systems. These were not lands waiting to be discovered. They were inhabited, ruled, rich in history. But to 19th century Europe, Africa was a vast, untapped resource. A map to be redrawn, a prize to be claimed. Histories unfolding over millennia were about to be violently interrupted, overwritten by a foreign narrative, imposed with ink, treaties, and the unassailable power of the gun. The story of modern Africa begins not in Africa, but in a grand building in Berlin, the winter of 1884. Representatives from 14 European nations and the United States gathered. No Africans were present. Lines were drawn with rulers, slicing peoples, severing trade, lumping rival kingdoms into artificial territories. The scramble for Africa. A gentleman's agreement to carve up a landmass that belonged to none of them. Why did Europe turn its gaze upon Africa? The reasons form a web of greed, ambition, and ideology, powered by the Industrial Revolution. Factories in Manchester, Lyon, Hamburg demanded raw materials and new markets. Rubber, palm oil, cotton, colonization as business enterprise, secure and monopolize supply, shut out rivals. Empire became a scoreboard of power. Britain, France expanding, Germany, Italy racing to their place in the sun, underpinning it all. Racial ideology and pseudoscience, framing conquest as paternal duty, the white man's burden. Uplift in rhetoric, subjugation in practice. Technology, like the Maxim gun, tilted the battlefield. Where force wasn't used, deception was. Treaties in foreign tongues, ceding vast territories for a pittance. Indirect rule kept local hierarchies to enforce laws, collect taxes, recruit labor. Efficient, cheap, divisive. Turn African against African. Embed power deep in society. Africa, reimagined as the engine room for European prosperity. The immediate consequences were catastrophic and enduring. Land and labor. Fertile lands seized, granted to settlers and corporations. Africans rendered landless. New taxes, payable only in colonial currency, forced people into a cash economy. Men left villages for plantations, mines, and rails that funneled Africa's wealth to the coast. Often, it was forced labor, under horrific conditions. In Leopold's Congo Free State, a royal fiefdom, impossible rubber quotas were enforced with terror, including mutilations by the force publique. Millions perished, from violence, hunger, and disease. Congo was extreme. The principle was continent-wide, labor as a resource to be exploited. Missionaries and educators dismissed traditional beliefs and languages as primitive, imposing European curricula. Children learned to see their own culture as shameful. A class emerged, belonging to neither world. In Rwanda, colonial identity engineering hardened divisions, with devastating future consequences. Legacies of administrative convenience became legacies of mass violence. From the moment a European flag touched African soil, there was resistance. Samurai Touré led disciplined armies against the French for over a decade. In Namibia, Herero and Nama resistance met extermination. The first genocide of the 20th century. Superior firepower crushed early wars, but lit a flame that endured. As armed resistance waned, the struggle shifted. A new generation embraced rights, liberty, self-determination. Associations and parties planted the seeds of nationalism. First came reform, then came the tide. Hundreds of thousands fought overseas, seeing colonizers as mortal, hearing promises of freedom. Back home they asked, if Poland and Czechoslovakia, why not Ghana, Kenya, Senegal? Exhausted empires, hostile superpowers, and a new UN tilted history's wind. The demand was no longer reform, it was uhuru, freedom, now. The struggle was carried by remarkable individuals, men and women. Kwame Nkrumah's vision. Ghana's freedom meant little without Africa's total liberation. Positive action, strikes and civil disobedience brought independence in 1957. Branded a mastermind of Mau Mau, imprisoned, then first president of Kenya. Senghor blended cultures. Touré chose liberty over dependency, poverty and liberty, if need be. Mandela's sacrifice galvanized the world. Nyerere Ujamaa sought dignity through cooperation. The road was rarely straight or smooth. One factor often decided the path: settler populations. Where settlers were few, negotiations prevailed. Kenya's brutal conflict broke imperial will. Independence followed. 8 years, over 1 million dead. The war nearly tore France apart before Algeria won in 1962. Lisbon's dictatorship refused decolonization until 1974 toppled it. Victory left deep scars, devastation that seeded later civil wars. The price of freedom was high. Independence had arrived, but the hardest work lay ahead. Independence brought euphoria, but the shadow of colonialism was long. Nations inherited Berlin's lines, forcing diversity into fragile frames. Imported constitutions met thin state capacity. Instability followed. Militaries stepped in, ushering in decades of coups. Economically, the colonial model endured. Export raw, import value. A global system remained rigged against African prosperity. The most insidious legacy: minds taught to prize the foreign over the familiar. The work of decolonization had only begun. Today, more than 60 years on, decolonization remains urgent. The struggle moved to boardrooms, courts, classrooms. How free is a continent whose wealth still flows overseas? How do nations build with debts signed on unequal terms? The scramble is back. Less for territory, more for resources and influence. Many insist on economies that serve people, build industries, and trade fairly. Decolonizing curricula centers African histories, literatures, philosophies, and languages. Reclaiming knowledge once dismissed as primitive, without rejecting the world. The journey continues, in parliaments, classrooms, and tech hubs from Lagos to Nairobi. The untold story is still being written, toward not just independence, but complete and total liberation.